Hello, I'm Tim Smith with the Adams County Historical Society, and welcome to our first edition of Monuments Monday. I thought we'd start by talking a little bit about Pennsylvania monuments on the battlefield. And a lot of people ask about how many monuments there are, and it really depends upon how you count. The park generally tells people, and they've said this for years, there's about 1,300 monuments, markers, and tablets. But if you count everything, there's well over 1,500. And again, there's there's a discrepancy about, when to count things as monuments and when not to, especially when you get into markers and tablets. But Pennsylvania is interesting. A lot of Pennsylvania units put up monuments initially in the early 1880s. And then what happened is the state legislature passed an act providing funds for every regimental association from the state of Pennsylvania to put up a monument. But many of them had already established their regimental monument. So those units used the money they got to build a new monument. And then they often took the original monument and moved it to a secondary location. Or they took the money and they added to the monument that had already been in place and made it more elaborate. So Pennsylvania monuments all over the battlefield are kind of interesting to study in this sense. So this is the 93rd Pennsylvania Infantry. This is the Lebanon County unit. So if you go to the Pennsylvania Monument, you can look at all the names of the men in this unit from Lebanon County. And they were part of the attack on July 2nd. We are along the Weikert Farm Lane. And at the end of the battle on July 2nd, as the Southerners were making one last attempt to capture Little Round Top, Wofford's Georgians were actually coming up the Wheatfield Road here and had overrun a Union artillery battery. When the 3rd Brigade of the 3rd Division of the 6th Army Corps arrived and charged down off of the slopes of what we generally refer to as Little Round Top behind us and into this area, driving the Southerners back and taking possession of a stone wall along the Weikert Farm Lane. Now, in 1884, the veterans of the 93rd Pennsylvania placed a monument here on this rock behind me. Now, when they got their appropriation from the state of Pennsylvania to put up a more substantial monument, they actually moved the original monument up to the top of a rise of ground behind us. And again, I know some people are going to say, that's not Little Round Top. Well, it's all part of what we consider Little Round Top. Sometimes, in more recent times, people have referred to this behind me as Munchauer's Hill, if you want to get technical. But this unit moved the monument that was originally here to that secondary location where the charge started from. And then they placed this much more substantial monument here. And it was dedicated on Pennsylvania Day, September 11th, 1889. And what's interesting about it is the original monument was a little smaller. And so it was on top of a rock, and we'll show an image of it here. Carved into the rock was 3rd Brigade, 3rd Division, 6th Army Corps, July 2nd and 3rd, 1863. And you can see that inscription in the photograph. But the more substantial monument would not really fit on that part of the rock. So they had to actually cut the rock down. And when they did, they got rid of the portion of the rock that said 3rd Brigade, 3rd Division, 6th Army Corps. But one of the interesting things is if you come out here today and you visit this site, the rock with the inscription that was broken up is still here. Just over here, there's a rock, and on it you can see the inscription, 3rd Brigade. And over here, back over to the right of that pile, on the back side of it, that rock clearly says 3rd Division on it. So although they cut the rock down and moved it, it didn't really go very far.